2:40 in the morning on the American West Coast, and a phone in Daly City is still refreshing the same resale page. Section 3, Row H, sold. Section 12, sold. One obstructed view seat near the baseline, $190, gone in the half second it takes a thumb to reach the confirm button. This is not a concert. This is a WTA 500 hard court tournament in Washington, and the woman driving that midnight scramble is ranked outside the top 25, printed 5th on the promotional poster in smaller type, beneath the phrase Rising Filipina Star.
We went to look for tickets, and there was a big line, so I thought, are we in the right line? Let's go to the info center.
Her name is Eala, and the seats the tour never expected her to move are 97% gone. That figure came out of the tournament's own chairman. Mark Ine went on Washington's W Top and described what was left as very scarce. 97% sold. The final sliver of inventory vanishing through Filipino community Facebook pages and SeatGeek resale threads faster than the DC Open could update the graphics on its own website. Sit with that. The last 3% did not disappear because of the headliners. It disappeared because of the name in the small type. Here is the arithmetic the WTA's marketing department did not want to run this week. This is the Mubadala DC Open, the 5th largest professional tennis event in the United States, running July 25th to August 2nd at the Fitzgerald Tennis Center in Rock Creek Park, roughly $1 million in prize money on the table. A tournament that built its poster around Alina Svitolina, around Marta Kostyuk, around Naomi Osaka, around Venus Williams, and the line at the box office formed for the 20-year-old they slotted in 5th. If you have followed this story since a side court in Melbourne, since before the algorithm knew her name, stay with me. This is the episode where the receipts come due. Hit subscribe, because this channel is logging every seating, every court assignment, every ticket count, from Washington all the way to Flushing Meadows. The next time the tour trips over this, we will have it on record before the press release lands. Rewind 6 days. July 6th, 2026. Center Court, Wimbledon. Eala walks off after a 3-set loss to Jasmine Paolini. 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. On paper, an exit. A round of 16 defeat to a former finalist. But look at what she was walking away from. 48 hours earlier, on Court 1, this same 20-year-old had dismantled the defending champion, Iga Swiatek, 3-time major winner, former world number 1, beaten 7-6, 6-2. A first-set tiebreak that clawed all the way to 11 points to 9, then a second set that was barely a contest. The first Filipina ever to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam in singles, and the tournament that would host her comeback 3 weeks later was about to learn the same lesson every other event keeps learning late. Understand where she is arriving from. In March, she cracked a career high of world number 29. By late June, she had climbed back to number 30 and, for the first time in her life, walked into a major as a seeded player. 29th at Wimbledon, with a first-round bye. That climb was not luck. A semifinal in Berlin. A title at the Birmingham event. Grass that seemed to unlock the best version of her game right before the biggest stage of her year. So this is not a fluke fan base attached to a fluke result. It is a pattern, and the tour keeps acting shocked by a pattern. Exhibit A. January 2026. Australian Open, first round. Eala drawn against Alicia Parks and assigned to Court 6. A side court barely wide enough for a line of spectators, let alone a national following. Reddit's tennis community documented what users called an insane queue just to get near the court. Yahoo Sports ran a headline about a scheduling blunder leaving the crowd in chaos. Front Office Sports reported fans left standing, with nowhere to sit. That is what happens when you schedule a movement like an afterthought. Exhibit B. 2 months later. Indian Wells, in the California desert, March. Reporters on the ground filed an observation that belongs laminated on a WTA boardroom wall. The crowds trailing Eala's practice sessions were on the scale of the crowds trailing Alcaraz, trailing Sinner, trailing Venus Williams. Meanwhile, Zverev and Fritz, top men, real names, were pulling a scattering of onlookers on the next court over. A player ranked around 31st in the world was outdrawing top 10 men at practice. Not at a match, at practice. That is not a fan club. That is a tide coming in. And this time, one tournament actually read the water. Philippe Dor, an executive at the BNP Paribas Open, said it straight into a live microphone. "We love every minute of it. We benefit from it. We promote it." 12 words. A tournament openly celebrating the exact demand the Australian Open had banished to Court 6 8 weeks earlier. Same player. Two institutions. Opposite intelligence. Exhibit C. Wimbledon. The Swiatek result did not just push her into the second week. It flipped the entire frame. The player one major had tucked onto a backcourt in January was now the reason a schedule had to be rebuilt around her in July. If you are Filipino and you stayed up past midnight for that scoreline, this is the part worth holding on to. You were not overreacting when you called her generational a year ago. You were not exaggerating when you told the people at work to write the name down. The events that filed her under bracket filler are the exact same events now scrambling to catch up to what a living room in Manila, a barbershop in Dubai, a kitchen in Daly City already understood long before the ranking agreed. Which is what makes the DC Open number land the way it does. 97%. Very scarce. Diaspora Facebook groups coordinating group buys, single session tickets gone almost as fast as they were released, resale prices climbing, and a WTA 500 in the American capital bracing to look less like a WTA 500 and more like a Filipino home crowd assembled inside a foreign city. And if the tour needed someone to translate what was happening, it already got the translation 6 months ago, from the single loudest voice the sport owns. Novak Djokovic. 24 Grand Slam titles. More weeks at number 1 than anyone in the history of the men's game. A man who has watched the sport manufacture and discard a dozen next big things, and who can tell the difference between a marketing push and a genuine cultural shift. In January, speaking to ABS-CBN about the crowds swarming her matches, Djokovic called it a good problem to have. Read that in full context. When the most accomplished player of his generation looks at a 20-year-old's fan base and describes it as a problem worth having, the tournament directors do not get to keep filing it under surprise. He named the thing in one sentence. The tour then spent 6 months proving it was not listening. And here is why this is not a one-week headache. It is a preview of an entire hardcourt summer being rewritten in real time. The demand Eala pulls does not stop at the Beltway. On August 1st, the National Bank Open opens in Toronto, a city with one of the largest Filipino-Canadian populations on the continent, then Cincinnati, then the US Open in late August, where her projected seeding after Wimbledon lands somewhere around 28. 3 tournaments. 3 chances for the WTA to get out ahead of another Court 6 moment, or 3 more chances to step on the same rake. And the math underneath all of it is not returning to zero. The Philippines is a basketball-first country of 115 million people, being converted to tennis one match at a time, one upset at a time. The diaspora, threaded through California, Nevada, Virginia, Ontario, the Gulf, is a market the WTA has never held a real key to before. That is not a fan base. That is commercial territory. The tour is only now realizing it left unclaimed. The Filipino sports journalist TJ Manitok laid the ceiling out in plain terms to front office sports. The country, he said, has been hungry for the next Manny Pacquiao, and when Pacquiao fought at his peak, the country stopped. Roads emptied. Everyone watched. That is the altitude Eala is climbing toward. The DC Open scramble is only what the ground floor looks like. Now think about who is watching that ground floor. A title sponsor whose name sits on the tournament in Washington and on the Indian Wells event in the desert. The same sponsor, watching one crowd get planned for and another get banished to a back court. Broadcasters counting a viewership pocket that switches on at odd hours across Manila, Dubai, and the American West Coast, all at once, for a single player ranked outside the top 25. Every sold-out session is a data point, and the data point keeps saying the same thing. The demand is real, it is loud, and it is being left on the table. That is the quiet part of this story. This was never only about seats. It is about a governing body that spent a year treating a windfall like a nuisance, and an audience that decided it would stop waiting for permission to show up. Now the honest counterweight, because this channel is not here to sell you a fairy tale. None of this arrives without a cost. On center court, 48 hours after burying Swiatek, Eala's serve wobbled. She played with preventive tape wrapped around her left forearm, and she called it exactly that. More precaution than injury, at the tail end of a long season. Paolini took the deciding set 6-3. The run ended. And then Iga Swiatek, of all people, sat down in the press room and delivered the line that reframes the entire story. "Approach these moments with bravery," she said, "with a steady mind and with intensity, and you can look back and feel no regret." She added the quieter half out loud. "Everyone has days when the tennis does not show up, and understanding that is simply part of the job." Hold those two ideas next to each other. The WTA may spend this whole summer swallowing regret over crowds it refused to plan for. And the player at the center of the storm has already told the world, in her own voice, that regret is not a currency she trades in. So line the fragments up, one after another. Court 6 in January. Practice courts outpulling top 10 men in March. Swiatek falling on Court 1 in July. A tournament chairman on the radio calling his own ticket supply very scarce. The greatest of all time naming the phenomenon before the tour was willing to admit it existed. And a 20-year-old walking off center court, refusing to hand a single minute of her career over to regret. The WTA did not sell out the DC Open. Filipino fans did. One resale ticket, one group chat, one 2 a.m. refresh at a time. And every seat this tour ever stuck on the wrong court is being bought back now, at market price, with interest. So here is the question worth arguing about down in the comments. When the US Open draw drops in August, does the WTA finally hand her a primetime slot on a stadium court big enough to hold the crowd, or does it get caught flat-footed one more time and shove her onto an outer court while the line wraps all the way around the grounds? Make the call now, before the seedings come out. If you saw the Swiatek upset coming before the tiebreak was even over, if you spotted this movement while Court 6 was still trending, this is where the receipts get filed. Subscribe and hold the tour accountable with us. Because the next time a tournament underestimates Eala, we are going to have the story queued up before the press office ever hits send.